The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows. Hey everyone, I'm Father Andrew Kinstetter, and you're listening to The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings behind many great movies and TV shows. And today is a big one. We are discussing a movie that continues to break all sorts of records. As of this past weekend, it has made over $1.69 billion worldwide, ranking it as the number sixth movie of all time. So it's falling behind Avatar, Avengers Endgame, Titanic, Star Wars The Force Awakens, and Avengers Infinity War. So if all those clues or our episode title have not clued you in yet on what you're actually listening to, we are discussing all things related to the newest Marvel blockbuster film, Spider-Man: No Way Home. And joining me from across the multiverse are my friends who are going to join me in talking about this awesome movie. First of all, we have Andrew Hermes.
Hello, hello. Glad to be here.
It's awesome to have you. We also have Mike Creevy.
Hey, I'm excited to jump into this one for sure.
And finally, we have Thomas Salerno. Hey, Thomas.
Hey, guys. It is great to be here to talk about yet another Marvel hit, I think.
It's truly marvelous.
Oh, no.
Sorry, that I don't do dad jokes, but on occasion. So we're going to just jump right into this because this is such a big movie and there's a lot to talk about. So kind of my first question that I just want to throw out to you guys is, what did you think of this movie? Was it worth all the hype? Is this theatrical success a true indicator of what this movie is all about? Is it better than that, or is it even worse, perhaps, in your opinion? So some have even called this the best MCU movie ever. So I kind of want to know what you guys thought. Agree, disagree, and tell me what you thought.
Well, I thought it would have been a very, very long time before I had a theatrical experience like Endgame.
Yep.
I thought I would have to wait, maybe another decade. How long did it take to set Endgame up? It took a decade, right? So I didn't think that like so soon, just a few years removed from a couple years really removed from Endgame, that I would sit in a theater and just have the same sort of emotional and communal and all that sort of stuff that, I'm sure everyone's familiar with, having seen it for remembering their first time watching this film in the theaters. So, it's for me, I know we're going to dig into this movie and break it down. I wouldn't call it the best Marvel film. It's probably upper tier.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely top tier, actually. I'll definitely say that. But it's arguable whether it's the best Spider-Man film. But at the end of the day, if these movies are supposed to entertain us, and this is definitely the most entertaining Spider-Man film. This is definitely the most satisfying fan service in a very good way. Not in a cheap way at all, I don't think. And I think most people would agree with that. And I feel like they delivered on the hype. And for a movie that was so the spoilers are out there for so long. And, Andrew Garfield had to lie for 2 years. And now he's relieved that he can just live freely. For the movie to still deliver on it with a good portion of the audience kind of knowing what the big surprises were, I thought was a big credit to the film and how good it really was. Because at the end of the day, it still was a good Spider-Man movie, a good Peter Parker movie, a good Tom Holland specific Spider-Man movie. I don't think they took away at all from what his character had to go through. I mean, out of all the Tom Holland movies, this is definitely the one that affects him the most, and really changes the course of his character. So I loved the heck out of this movie. It probably will end up being my favorite Spider-Man movie, up there with the original Spider-Man 2. But yeah, it was everything I wanted and more. So I totally dug it.
It's interesting because I actually went into this movie a little bit apprehensive. And that's only because I was kind of lukewarm on the first two MCU Spider-Man movies. And I don't know, I'm not sure what it was, whether it was because he was so reliant on the Stark technology, or that I thought the Vulture and Mysterio, because they had beefs with Tony Stark, I felt that kind of distracted from the conflict with Peter. But I don't know, like there were aspects of both those movies that I really, really liked, but neither of them really stuck the landing for me personally. And so with this third one, I was kind of like, even with all the spoilers that were out there, I was like, I don't know. And I saw the trailers, and from what I gleaned from at least some of the trailers was, okay, this is kind of going to be a Spider-Man, Doctor Strange team-up movie. And a lot of it is going to focus, at least the first half, is going to focus on Peter being persecuted by J. Jonah Jameson and the authorities. And so I went in kind of thinking this movie might not really be for me. But luckily, pretty much all my fears were groundless. I really liked this movie a lot. Like, the as I'm sure we'll get into, the Doctor Strange segments do not take over the whole movie. He is kind of there to sort of set things in motion with Peter, but then he kind of fades into the background. This is Spider-Man's story from beginning to end. And like the stuff about, you know, him dealing with the authorities and the fallout with Mysterio actually like sort of like also faded into the background surprisingly fast, I thought. I liked how this movie kind of just moves along at a really good pace, gives you all that fan service stuff that you want, and even like little like smaller spoilers besides like the other Spider-Men that I thought were going to happen did happen. This is definitely a crowd-pleasing movie. I saw this in a theater packed. I don't think there was anybody over 40 in that theater. And most of the people, in fact, yeah, my theater, it was mostly 20s and under. I'm pretty sure that at 33, I may have been one of the oldest people there.
Wow.
But the crowd was nuts for this movie. It was a great theater experience. All of those moments that were fan service moments from, you know, referencing all of the live action Spider-Man history, they worked perfectly with the crowd I saw it with. This was definitely a see it in theaters experience, and one that I'm going to remember, I think, for quite a while. Like some of the MCU movies for me have kind of been see it and forget it, but I think this one surprised me, and it'll stay with me for a long time.
Yeah, I agree with what you guys, basically everything you guys said, you know, and the same observations in a lot of cases, you know, here in PA, like, so this is a universal sort of thing. And, you know, it's interesting. I don't want to get ahead of it here, Father, and I might have missed this detail if you had anything specifically about like any of like the discussion about like our background with the different Spider-Man series or anything, or if I should mention some of that now, or
go for it now.
If that's okay.
We're kind of merging all of that.
Yeah. Because so basically, yeah, I mean, it's similar to, I think, a lot of people's sort of experience. So I'm, you said, Tom, you're 33. Yeah. I just turned 38. And so I have a lot of just rich memories of, just a few weeks before my senior year of high school. It was August 2001, and I remember being at some movie. I forget what the movie was I was seeing at the time, but you know, this heist movie trailer starts and it's a bank robbery, and I'm like, okay, you know, bank robbery, seen that before. And you know, the guys are escaping in the helicopter, and all of a sudden the helicopter starts shaking and jostling, and you're like, what's going on? And the camera just yanks back and pulls back and pulls back, and you see that the helicopter is stuck in a giant spider web, right about halfway up the World Trade Center towers. And I think you guys remember that too. Of course, a lot of people do. You can get it on YouTube now, I'm sure, and find it. But they, of course, pulled that pretty quickly just for taste, after the 9/11 attacks. And, that isn't in the original film then and everything. But I still remember that being my senior year and having this all the craziness that was going on, and also all the just, even if that wasn't going on, all the life-changing things of graduating high school. And so that's where I'm at in life, and it comes out that summer. And it was just such a wonderful, the Tobey Maguire original, Spider-Man movie. I loved it. We had so much fun. I have fond memories of then seeing the sequel a few years later. So for me, it really brings back this nostalgia of a time of my life where, you'd see your friends over the summer and go to this big blockbuster. And this is, of course, before the MCU days. So like, these are the superhero movies. And around the same time, the Christian Bale Batman movies started coming out too. So right after that. But so I loved all of them. I remember sitting in the theater and laughing so hard with that ridiculous, like, Tobey Maguire dance segment, the jazz club, like all that stuff that's like corny now. I love seeing Bully Maguire all over YouTube. I frequently send the Secrets of Star Wars friends. I send Secrets of Star Wars friends. It's so terrible. I send you guys, Bully Maguire stuff that relates to Star Wars on a regular basis. But at any rate, I love those ones. Then the Andrew Garfield ones, I love those as well. It wasn't quite the same time of my life as far as that experience of seeing it with friends that much. But I love those ones too. I thought it was a neat, different take on it. Full disclosure, I'm not like a really read up, well-educated Spider-Man fan as far as comics and the whole heritage of it. I kind of, follow it up on the fly in terms of if I need to go look somebody up, like, who's Adrian Toomes? Like, okay, Vulture, okay, all right, and then you see like, oh, this character's 50, 60 years old or 40 years old, so I've kind of got caught up on the characters as they're introduced if I didn't know who they were. But then as soon as they threw Tom Holland like a stick of dynamite right into for his very first appearance in Captain America: Civil War, I think that's where they introduced him, right?
Yep.
At the airport, basically. I remember thinking back then, I was like, God, who is this kid? Like, this kid, like, how do you go into this setting, especially at that age, him being pretty young, a good chunk of his youth watching MCU movies, and he completely steals that scene. Like, he absolutely steals that airport fight scene. And it's not in a showy way. It's absolutely organic. And I do think that by, at least the first standalone movie he was in, he was at least tied as my favorite Spider-Man, if not an outright, superstar with it. And so by the time you get to this one, everything you guys said, the last thing I'll say is just that it's I don't know. I still don't know how he does it. I don't know that you then have him with his heroes in this movie as themselves, not some lame cameo like Tobey Maguire's a cab driver or something like that. It's like there he is. And not only does it's not forced that he's like the chief Spider-Man, Peter One, right? Like, it's like they clearly love, like, the characters and the actors themselves love that. Like, you could just tell that Toby and Andrew, like, were so thrilled to be able to be with him in this Spider-Man movie. I just thought that was, so I loved it. And there's a lot of fun stuff for us to unpack for sure.
Yeah, I pretty much echo everything that you guys were saying. I think it was a phenomenal movie. And I've seen it quite a few times already anyway, because of that fact. And Mike, it's funny that you talk about the Tobey Maguires as kind of, I wouldn't say your Spider-Man, but they kind of hit you at a point in your life when it was really impactful. And for me, I'm 32, so I'm probably the youngest on this panel. And for me, the Tobey Maguires we saw them on TV every now and again, and like they were kind of fun, but I wasn't really drawn into them. And the Andrew Garfield ones hit me at a time that were just I was, in fact, it was a summer between my minor seminary and major seminary years. I was doing a couple summer classes. I was kind of at this really tiny parish because I had to do these summer classes. So I wasn't going to be in a big parish with a lot going on, so I could focus on the summer classes. And like, I was feeling a little bit lonely because I was out there kind of just with the pastor, and the pastor is, in fact, he's almost at retirement age now. So, I mean, he's, there was an age gap there. And like, so I was feeling a little bit lonely, and then I go and see this movie, The Amazing Spider-Man, and the themes in that movie really resonated with me. And the whole idea of, Dr. Kurt Connors trying to build a world without weakness. And, in seminary, you're very clearly, you're not trying to build a world without weakness, but you're looking at the weaknesses that you have in your own life, and you're trying to deal with them, and you're trying to grow, and you're trying to, so there was like this weird parallel. And so in that summer, like, so I, clearly the way that Dr. Kurt Connors goes about trying to get rid of weakness is the wrong way. And, and so I identified then with Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker. And so there was this real strong kind of bond there, if you will. And then for me, then the Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out, and there was a lot going on in that movie, but I was all for the potential for the Sinister Six and the movies that they were planning to come after that. And then of course that all just kind of got knocked down because it didn't do so well.
Right.
And then No Way Home comes out, and this felt like a proper way to kind of bridge the gap between Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker, even Tobey Maguire's. There's all sorts of emotional resonance that happens with both of their characters, and then of course with Tom Holland's. So like for me to sit in that theater and to have tempered my expectations, because I went into it assuming, and I just made the assumption and chose to make the assumption that this is just going to pull in villains from the old movies, but not Tobey and Andrew. And I did that because I didn't want to go into the movie expecting Tobey and Andrew and then be disappointed if they didn't show up.
I did the same thing.
Yeah.
Better safe than sorry.
I would have been disappointed if they weren't there, because by that point, and Andrew Garfield's a bad liar. So I didn't,
well, that's
whatever he said in interviews was like,
I feel like there was enough doubt that it was okay for me to say, I'm going to just not hope for this. So then when it happened in the movie theater, like to go in a packed theater.
That's the healthier option. Yeah. You what you did was much better.
And like the theater exploded in cheers, and like,
yes.
I was one of those.
Yeah. My crowd went nuts when Andrew showed up.
Crazy. Yeah. Just standing up, and it was nuts. Throwing popcorn. It was there
was a lot of that in my theater.
It was also funny, and we're gonna kind of blend into this, but when Charlie Cox shows up, like the guy next to me,
that was the first one.
The guy next to me like couldn't at all sit still in his chair, and I hadn't seen any of Daredevil at that point, and so I was sort of like, okay, I don't know what the big deal is about this guy.
That scene was exactly what I wanted it to be. In fact, it almost opened the exact way I imagined it would, which was kind of focusing on his walking stick, his cane, and then panning up to him. I was like, that's exactly how I imagined in my mind how that scene would open with him there. And it was just brilliant. I loved it, because I was like, they have to do this. If Peter is going to be in trouble with the law, Matt Murdock needs to be his lawyer. There is no other option.
Like, it's not going to be like Thor, who's just bored and
Loki would be the one who would. Mike and Andrew, are you guys Daredevil fans at all?
Huge Daredevil fan.
You know, it's funny. I might. So speaking of that era I was just speaking of, I always enjoyed the one that came out years ago. That was my first introduction to the character. That wasn't a repeat viewing one, for me per se, but I enjoyed it. And I haven't seen it in years. And so I saw that there was a Daredevil series coming out. I think it's around the time we were getting married and stuff. And it never really ended up on my radar. And so like I've been aware of it, and I knew that Charlie Cox was in it. And I recognized him oddly enough from a great Jose Maria Escriva movie that came out years ago called There Be Dragons, where he plays Saint Jose Maria as a young priest. And so that's about all I knew. I knew he was in it. And so it was good because I knew enough to know who the character is, so that then when they showed up, I was genuinely, that was probably the biggest surprise for me watching this movie. I was like, oh man, I was like, that's cool. And of course we were watching Hawkeye, so we had just seen that week, the introduction of Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin, who I was a little more familiar, that resonated with me more. I was like, oh, I think that was the Michael Clark Duncan bad guy, right? And I'm looking it up. And so I had just been researching that a little bit, on YouTube and stuff for a few days. So good timing, right? With release dates and stuff, like, geez.
If you haven't watched Daredevil, you got to watch Daredevil.
I'm going to go back and check it out.
One of the biggest crimes is having to cancel Daredevil after season 3, because in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, that was their best season. And it kind of set itself up for like a great story going forward. But with the whole at that time Marvel TV and Marvel films were kind of separate, and then Disney Plus was about to come out, so they were moving all their stuff out of Netflix and all that, so it kind of was a consequence of that.
Got lost in the mix, I guess, or
right, it was just unfortunate, but I knew it was only a matter of time because the character was so popular, especially Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio specifically. I don't think you could recast those guys, and obviously Marvel was aware of that. So I'm glad that we're gonna see more of these characters down the line.
And didn't Kevin Feige say at one point, like, he didn't affirm any of it, but he made some reference to Charlie Cox is the MCU's.
I think he said
he did
something like that.
It was
he did confirm that before the movie came out, but he didn't confirm that he was in
Spider-Man.
Right. He was like, if Daredevil is going to be in the MCU, it's Charlie Cox.
Right.
Yeah. What was cool for me is that I started reading the comics, the Marvel comics, in the early 2000s when they had relaunched with their Ultimate branding of comics. Is called Marvel Ultimate or Ultimate Marvel. And there were a few story arcs that I read in the Spider-Man comics at that time where Spider-Man actually teamed up with Daredevil. And I was a big fan of those issues. So to finally see the two characters on screen in live action was a real treat for me. I liked that a lot.
Well, I just loved how that scene went. That was just such a cool, because even if you didn't know who Daredevil is, that gives you this little let's pay attention to this guy because he might be a superhero. So I thought that was well done.
He's a really good lawyer.
Assume everyone knows. Yeah, really good. Oh my gosh.
So and maybe this is a question for you guys. I did, after watching No Way Home, go back and watch. I watched the pilot for Daredevil, and it didn't quite grip me as I thought it might. And is it one of those that I need to give it some more time, or? Because it was a bit, shall I say, it was a bit grittier than what my normal flair of superhero movies and TV shows is. It was
It's definitely not MCU-ified, so to speak.
There are
definitely gritty.
Yeah,
there are some subtle references to the rest of the MCU throughout, but tonally it's very different.
Okay,
yeah.
So I might give it another chance, but it was far darker than I was expecting, and so it kind of stalled my desire to keep going, even though I'm intrigued by the character for sure. But
obviously the themes of behind the character and the fact that he's a Catholic and is trying to be a devout Catholic while being a crime fighter, mass vigilante, plays an important part of the show, and they highlight it, I think, very well, especially for a highly produced Marvel Disney property. So I think just stick with it. It is violence, but it's entertaining. It's still entertaining.
Yeah. So to kind of, I guess, shift into the plot a little bit. I think one of the other things that I really, really, really liked about No Way Home was how relatable it feels, even though it's this whimsical multiversal kind of story, the way that it grounds itself in Peter and his struggles felt very relatable to me, and perhaps in a way that I wasn't really expecting. And so like I was talking about with The Amazing Spider-Man and my connection to that, like this movie, there was all sorts of things that I was like immediately connecting to, where, you know, you've got the just the whole idea of the J. Jonah Jameson fake news kind of thing happening, and painting Peter Parker as this villain. And, you know, that's been a reality of fake news in our world today. And, you know, and even the Catholic Church has been, you know, on the receiving end of some of that kind of things. And so for Peter to kind of have to go through some of that, and then just their normal, their current challenges to apply to MIT, you know, and to get in. And I'm going to share this with you guys because it's not private yet, or it's not, anyways, I'm applying for canon law. So like I'm applying to CUA at the moment. So like even just that whole notion of like, and I'm not really worried about being accepted or not. Like, okay, the bishop is clearly gonna, you know, say the magic words and I'm gonna get accepted, you know, but like to be on that receiving end of like, I'm currently finishing my application and then I'm going to send it off and like have to wait for the app or the response letter. Again, like there's all these things that I'm relating to, like, oh my gosh, I've been there. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of crazy. So, and I guess
that, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that reinterpretation of J. Jonah Jameson as a kind of online conspiracy monger was genius.
It really was.
Because, like, you know, originally in the comics, he was a newspaper editor, and newspapers really aren't as relevant anymore. So how do you make this character relevant? And it's like, you make him this kind of online shock jock conspiracy guy. I just thought that was handled brilliantly. It's the perfect way to keep the essence of that character, but still modernize him and make him more relevant to audiences. I really
did you notice how radically different his setup kept getting?
Yeah,
like sponsor money coming.
It was in his room at first. Yeah,
and he was even promoting those supplements like they do on cable news, which that made me laugh. That was brilliant.
Well, and supposedly I never saw this because I'm not on TikTok, but apparently the dailybugle.net created a TikTok account leading up to the release of the movie in theaters.
Yeah. That's funny.
Viral marketing.
Yeah. So there was some pretty genius stuff happening. So, yeah. And I mean, definitely the same character. You know, he still had the mustache too, and not as much head hair, but yeah, totally J. Jonah Jameson.
Well, I was thinking because J.K. Simmons hasn't, as far as I know, I don't know that he's appeared in commercials or any spin-off stuff or any spoofs on it. But I mean, you figure there's a role that he hasn't played in. When was the last one? 2007, I guess, with Toby. So, you know, there's a good, 15, 16 years, almost, there's just this like long time, 14, 15 years, I guess. And it's like, just jumps right back in it. It was so fun.
Yeah, another guy that you just can't recast. Like when you think of that character, even if you read like if you read comics now and that character shows up, like I hear J.K. Simmons' voice. Yeah.
But I think that's one of the reasons why this movie works so well. And because you have the characters of J. Jonah Jameson, who's, the actor reprises his role. But then you've got all the villains that come in fairly quickly, and Toby and Andrew, and you have 20 years of fans who are responding to this movie, and all of us have our own connections to the different movies that came before. But we've mentioned before that this is fan service done well. They didn't just bring him in to be a cameo or any of these others just to be cameos, but they all play a role and their characters are honored in a way that we find appropriate and satisfying, and we're totally on board with it, which is really awesome to see play out in a movie like this. So speaking of that, the whole reason that does happen is because we do have the team up, but not really a team up at all, with Doctor Strange. And I think that bringing in Doctor Strange to do this was, well, I don't think I could have come up with a better plot way to open up the multiverse. So what'd you guys think of Doctor Strange and his role in this movie?
I think, like you said, I think it was a perfect match, especially to bring about the whole multiverse and thinking about where Doctor Strange himself as a character is. It really fit well. You know, he's not the Sorcerer Supreme, and he kind of has like this ongoing thing with Wong. You know, he's kind of like butthurt about it, right?
Great throwaway line there.
You know,
So
yeah. And so so he finds this opportunity with Peter, who he obviously has a history with. You know, they were both dusted for 5 years, and they both came back. They both had to fight Thanos. They both had to suffer the loss of, you know, Tony Stark. And he finds this opportunity to find purpose again. He's like, I can help my friend out, you know, who's going through a hard time. You know, now that like the time stone is gone and I'm no longer the Sorcerer Supreme. So it kind of fit well. Because I think Doctor Strange as Sorcerer Supreme would have been like Wong and be like, no, that's, you know, when we first meet Doctor Strange in his first film, when he first becomes the quote unquote Sorcerer Supreme or Doctor Strange, he's quite conservative, you know, and he doesn't take risks with spells and magic and all that. And he's just worried about protecting the fabric of reality, right? That's his whole point of the whole point of his existence now. But I felt like they found a good like through line and a good plot device for him and Peter to match up. And I like how Peter just looking at a Halloween decoration of a what was it, a witch or something that reminded him of Doctor Strange. So
I thought that actually was a little light of him. What was it, or that's what it looked like? I don't know, but
it kind of looked like I forgot what it was. Was it vampire?
Okay.
I think you're right.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But it doesn't. It looks like him though.
It had a goatee, so yeah, it was a vampire. So I think that's what reminded him of him.
I wasn't thinking of that. But cool. Okay.
Yeah. So I totally bought like how everything happened and how Doctor Strange was brought in and all that. So I thought it worked very well.
Yeah, definitely. I thought that it reminded me of the way they do it in comic books sometimes, where you have like a book where there's one character who's like the main star, like say it's a Spider-Man book, and say Spider-Man has some problem that he needs to solve. Well, there'll be an issue where he meets up with Iron Man or with Doctor Strange or whoever it is, and there'll be a little side plot with that character, but then it will just kind of seamlessly blend back in to Spider-Man's story. Like they never have another character come in and take over the other character's book for no reason, which is what I feared was going to happen with this movie. But no, it works brilliantly. Like Doctor Strange, like he's there to sort of initiate the plot and sort of give Peter, you know, things to I'm kind of losing my train of thought. But yeah, he's there for a perfect amount of time. He doesn't overstay his welcome. They actually kind of make a joke of that later, right? Where he's like, I was stuck in the Grand Canyon for 12 hours or whatever it was. That was brilliant. And Benedict Cumberbatch does a great job as always. I think that they use this as a great opportunity to set up his upcoming sequel where he's going to be dealing more with the multiverse and stuff like that. So I think this was definitely a great way of preparing audiences for that and what we may come to expect in the future. But yeah, I think it was handled just right. They did a great job.
Yeah, and just to add one more thing, you know, originally Multiverse of Madness was supposed to come out before No Way Home. So yeah, you know, because of the pandemic and scheduling conflicts, there was no way Multiverse of Madness was gonna come out in time, and Sony wanted to make the date, so they rewrote a lot of Doctor Strange's story within the film. A lot of it, from what I've read, was kept pretty much the same as far as like his essential role. But yeah, there were some key things that obviously there's going to be a lot of stuff that happens in Multiverse of Madness. There were key things they had to leave out or change in order to fit the end, vice versa. They had to do some rewrites for Multiverse of Madness. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out after that film comes in. So, but yeah, I just wanted to add that.
I'm kind of glad that this was the first multiverse film, though. I mean, because it was sort of if the Multiverse of Madness happened first, I don't know, maybe the multiverse would have been a more household name by No Way Home. But the fact that it's sort of this complete unknown unknown thing in No Way Home adds to just the whole kind of mystery of what's going on, and it felt very cool and mysterious, appropriately mysterious. And
they introduced the a little bit, of introduction with it in Loki, certainly by the end, but not in such a way that it took anything away from these either. So I felt like it's really kind of dovetailed all of them nicely. And even in the What If series, which, I enjoyed that, but, like that's one series where I am glad I watched it, at least some of them, because there was at least one very important reference in the trailer for Multiverse of Madness that they had at the end of this movie that I got because I had watched What If. So they are introducing it in a few ways.
Yeah, I was going to say it was kind of a nice payoff to have seen all of What If and then go into this movie. And they're just talking about the multiverse. I'm like, oh, yeah, I've seen that. I know what that is. That's really cool. I get to see it in live action now. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's always funny because I went to see No Way Home with my dad. And I think my dad like really appreciates that I know all of this stuff because he has not a clue. And I'm like, oh, that's so-and-so or that was the evil evil Doctor Strange, or I forget what his name is in the What If series, but I was like, and here's why that matters. And so like after the movie, like I'm telling him all these things, and
we save him like 45 minutes here, 28 minutes there. It's like that's good. That's all I needed to know. Cool.
Oh, so yeah, I think that this was a heck of a lot of fun for sure. So to kind of then jump in, of course, to what comes next is the villains. What do you guys think of the villains that they brought back? Do you think that there were others that you wanted and didn't get, or was this the appropriate ones that came in? And I thought it was a lot of fun the way that they brought these ones in.
I was thrilled with all of them. I thought the way they did it was brilliant. I thought the order was good. Because I don't know, Alfred Molina, he's the one I wanted to see the most. And Willem Dafoe, like who doesn't want to see more Willem Dafoe? But I like some of the behind the scenes stuff where they pointed out how, there had been some disagreements in the original movie with him about how often he has the helmet on, and that conflicting a little bit with his acting and stuff. And so I thought it was interesting that there were things that they sort of lessons learned, or that they took, apparently some of the feedback from these guys who were coming back, to reprise these roles seriously. Even that I like Jamie Foxx said in that one interview they had the three of them sitting there, and he said that he was excited because they also told him he didn't have to be blue.
Yeah,
and I loved how they just explained it, because it's like, oh, this is the Stark universe, so like electricity's different. I was like, oh, hey, I'm cool with that. That's fine, But the one thing that did confuse me just a little bit, and I know there was some questions about this online, and I didn't really see if there was any resolution, because isn't the whole like premise here that people who know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man are drawn into this rift? But I don't think Electro didn't know, did he? Like, I don't think he specifically knew, did he? That Peter was Spider-Man.
He did not, because he does mention, it's like, oh, I thought you would have been black,
right? Like even in the movie, he mentioned that. So yeah. I thought I don't know if that was a little plot hole or what, because everybody else did for different reasons, but that was a little.
It's magic.
And the pitch meeting guy made fun of it, which I thought was funny, because he's like, did Electro know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man? He's like, huh. oh, whoops. They just move on. So, he may have known the name. Okay, but that could be.
I'm totally guessing, but that might be that might be the plot.
It really wasn't.
Solution.
It wasn't on my mind until the end, really, when he was asked, or they were talking about that, and I'm like, wait a minute, yeah. So, but no, I thought they were great. I was so happy that they got them all back. You didn't have any, money fights or like some, or thank God, no, none of them had passed away or anything like that. So it was just a wonderful to see. And what they did with it, which we'll get into, of course, I knew that they were coming back, or that some of them would, but I was so blown away with why and where it went, like what Peter's mission ends up becoming, because I never really saw that coming. And I thought, what a neat and different, kind of way to approach this.
Yeah, those were the right villains. I mean, at least when you talk Doc Ock and Norman Osborn, those are the three at the forefront. The two at the forefront. Doc Ock, from Spider-Man 2, that's like arguably most people's favorite Spider-Man movie, and he's one of the best villains. And Willem Dafoe, obviously, is iconic as Green Goblin, so it just made sense. And then two phenomenal actors playing them, and I'm glad that with Jamie Foxx, and then even to a very lesser extent, you have Sandman and a Lizard. Their characters, I mean, I don't think they spent a day on set. If you watch the film, they're Sandman is always Sandman and Lizard is always Lizard. They never transform to their human selves until the very end of the film. And I think even then they might have used old footage. I don't know. But I'm glad that they focused on those two, and because there was so much going on in this film. And that they are so much the emotional core. And I think what makes it work too is that we didn't have to see Doc Ock's redemption again. Like, he kind of gets redeemed pretty quickly. It's like, okay, thank you. Like, just have to fix the chip, sort of thing. Like, we don't have to go around. Whoops, there goes my mic. We don't have to go around in circles. Like, okay, let's wait until he fixes his darn chip. I'm glad, because Doc Ock was, where we leave him was very, we had a lot of empathy for him, and he sacrificed himself to save the city. So I'm glad that they handled it that way. And I'm glad that allowed Green Goblin and Willem Dafoe to kind of be the main villain, the main nemesis, who has always been Spider-Man's main nemesis. So I'm glad that they did it in that manner, so it didn't get too convoluted and become like the problems that Spider-Man 3 had and Amazing Spider-Man 2 had. So again, learning from previous mistakes. And I thought it was a perfect lineup. Would have liked to see maybe Tom Hardy's Venom in there, but that would not have made sense. So it was probably better that he was out. I just like Tom Hardy and how he plays that character. It was nice seeing him in the post credits though.
That was brilliant.
Yeah. He would have been there just had he not had so much to drink and got out of Mexico.
There's so many questions.
Right. Yeah, I think that they did a brilliant job of timing with the villains, because like there were 5 key villains, but none of them seemed to dominate the time, and none of them you felt like you were spending too much time with one or the other. And there was a lot of characters in this movie. And this is still, basically the first act of the movie, and we're starting to bring these in, and they've got more coming. So, it was very appropriate, I think, to kind of make the Sandman and the Lizard to kind of take the back seat, but still be present, and then let the other 3 kind of be the more vocal and to be the ones more in the spotlight.
Yeah, I was worried the movie would feel crowded, but it didn't really. I felt that they juggled it pretty well. I was a little disappointed on the visual side of things that they don't seem to have improved the lizard effects at all since the Amazing Spider-Man. He still looked like garbage, and that kind of disappointed me because the MCU is usually takes so much care with its visual effects, and maybe it was an intentional choice. Maybe they're like, nah, we'll keep him as kind of an homage, make him look kind of goofy and ridiculous. But
I think they spent all the money in de-aging Alfred Molina and that final battle sequence.
Yeah, and I didn't really mind because like I've already implied, like The Amazing Spider-Man was still one of my top favorite Spider-Man movies, and so I appreciated Kurt Connors being kind of as I remember him. So yeah, to kind of shift gears slightly, I think one of the hearts of this movie is kind of that whole second act of the movie, if you will, of Aunt May's. They call it Aunt May's holy moral mission, but it's more than that. It's not just her mission. I mean, that kind of a mission of saving people, is definitely way more universal than just Aunt May's kind of mission. But that's how, the Green Goblin kind of points it out to Peter. And yeah, Mike, like you, I remember the first time watching the movie sort of kept subconsciously wanting Doctor Strange to just push the button and make everybody go back, because that's what you're supposed to do. They're in the wrong place. You got to get them back. And if you let them out, they're just going to wreak havoc. And so you need to get them back. And so to have Peter, be on board with wanting to redeem the villains, makes perfect sense, but it wasn't what I was expecting. And so I thought it was a very good place that they took these villains, but also took Peter, because that's at the heart of who Peter is he just wants to help people. He's not trying to get people hurt or even to kill the villains. I mean, that's not who Peter is. And so it was really, really cool to kind of see that theme of saving the villains, which is very Christian in nature too. I mean, the whole idea, and I think Thomas, you actually, I think, wrote about this in one of your articles, the whole idea of this is a way of loving your enemies.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny because I think like you, Father, at first I was a little put off by it when they're like, oh, like, I'm like, no, these guys are going to get out and they're going to cause more damage and people are going to die. But the more I thought about it after the movie, I'm like, this is like, pure gospel stuff here. Love your enemies, do good to those who persecute you. You know what it reminded me of? The parable of the lost sheep, right? Because especially when Christ says to the disciples after finishing the parable, the Son of Man has come to seek and save that what was lost. And you have these supervillains who are kind of lost in their own darkness, their own sin, their own madness and physical mutations. And you have Peter going in to try and seek them out, to go where they are and save them. Makes him, a Christ figure in this movie. And, to seek out and to extend mercy to people who, from our point of view, don't really deserve it, like the Green Goblin, or who are just going to take his mercy and throw it back in his face, But I just thought it was such a powerful message and so different from like what you see in some other superhero movies where it's like punch bad guy, movie over. Like I just thought it was different, and just the fact that I saw that theater with a huge crowd of young people. I said in one of the articles I wrote about this movie that I just felt that it's kind of that seed of the gospel. And movies like this that and I know the writers probably don't intend this, it's probably subconscious, but movies like this are kind of priming the imaginations of young people to have an encounter maybe later in life with Christ and with his gospel and with his church. And I just think that's so important, because I see so many people dismiss these movies. Every time an MCU movie comes out, some award-winning director or a highbrow critic is like, these movies are trash, they're a waste of time, they're not even film. And I'm like, no, they're connecting so much with the younger generation that it's important that we discuss them like we're doing right now. It's important to pull out these themes and messages here, because they are connecting. An entire generation has grown up with the MCU. And I really think that some people are missing an opportunity to kind of, to, like what we're doing, try to find what is grabbing people about these movies.
You hear that, Martin Scorsese?
Exactly.
Well, and I've heard it said that, I mean, any great story is going to have elements of Christ's story in it. And that's regardless of whether you're writing, superhero fiction or fantasy or Star Wars or, it doesn't matter what genre you're writing, but any truly good story is going to have those elements of redemption, of forgiveness, of, that self-sacrifice. And I think, Peter Parker in this movie, I mean, he exemplifies that, and he's also real too. He's not just without flaws or without his own vulnerabilities, and we even see that later on in the film when he is sorely tempted to kill the Green Goblin, and it has to be stopped by Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker. But so like Peter Parker is not just, he's not just kind of a Christ figure, but he's a relatable Christ figure, because we can all put ourselves in his shoes and know what that struggle is like to some degree or another, because we've all, I mean, and that's one of the great things about just storytelling in general is that's often how we learn how to deal with kind of the challenges and struggles of this world. Even though we frame it in a superhero genre, it's still, we're playing out, well, what happens when you have someone who, has killed your aunt and you want revenge? Is that the right option to take? And so we see that played out in a very, in fact, in this movie, in a very, very good way. And I'm going to save some of that conversation, I think, for later on when it becomes more and more prominent. But to kind of, I guess, focus just a little bit more here on just kind of the redemption or the saving the villains part. I also really liked the Green Goblin, and specifically the Green Goblin as opposed to Norman Osborn, because the Green Goblin has that demon kind of quality, the satanic, even his mask that he destroys kind of looks, demonic to a certain degree. And so he is the voice of the enemy, even to Peter. And so, he's trying to fill Peter's head with all the reasons why he shouldn't try to redeem the characters. And I think at one point he tells Peter that morality is his weakness. And I like that, because that is the voice of the enemy. And of course, that's often what even our world might kind of fall into, is that, we need to just kind of fall into relativism and kind of do whatever we think is right and ignore this sort of objective sort of morality or something beyond us. And of course, the Catholic take on that is that, morality is definitely not a weakness. And in fact, an analogy that I use often when I'm preaching about it or, talking to people about it, I like to use the analogy that the reason that God gave us, reason and morality and right and wrong, and these aren't just kind of rules that we just kind of made up and we have to just adhere to in order to be considered good people or good Christians. But rather it's like a guardrail on a mountain road that prevents us from falling off the mountain and dying, essentially. So, and so if you follow morality, it's not meant to hinder, it's not meant to restrict your freedom, but it's meant to actually allow you to be free on that mountain road without fear of falling off and dying. And that's a better way to kind of look at freedom in that sense, and not that morality is somehow limiting us. Because ultimately, if we follow that to its conclusion, if we just kind of throw morality out the window, it ultimately will lead us to our own destruction. And that's the contrary of what life is really all about. I don't know if you guys had any thoughts, or if I should.
I agree.
Well said.
I concur. That was perfect. Yeah, that is essentially the tragedy of the Green Goblin character and so many other superhero villains, right? But yeah, in that first Spider-Man movie, that's basically, he didn't have those guardrails. It's great to see that character have another chance at it, and to see it come full circle.
Yep. What did you guys think of Aunt May being kind of the Uncle Ben character for this version of Peter Parker? And specifically because she's the one who, at this point in the movie, when all the villains have, after Doc Ock is cured, but all the others kind of decide to kind of go off, and we have the fight with the Green Goblin, and the Green Goblin injures Aunt May greatly. She is the one who delivers the famous line, with great power there must also come great responsibility. And then, of course, her death is kind of that tragic moment in this Peter's life, where Uncle Ben was that for Toby's and Andrew's versions of the character.
Well, I haven't had a chance to go back and watch the previous Tom Holland ones, but I do remember near the very beginning of... Actually, you know what? I'm wondering, it might have even been it was either in Captain America Civil War, when Tony's over there first meeting him, or the first Tom Holland one, I forget which. But she, is giving him some sort of pep talk at one point and makes some passing reference to, that they've been through a lot. And I just always assumed that was a sort of a reference to Uncle Ben being tragically killed, which is always a feature of this. But it doesn't look like it, because he doesn't, like, when they start talking about Uncle Ben and their multiverse, doesn't seem like he has any recognition of that. So maybe she was, so I have to go back and look, and maybe that was just a general sort of like, they've been through a lot because his parents died, I guess, or she's been raising him. So maybe it was a little more direct with that. And
yeah, I think that was intentional. Yeah.
Okay.
I think you're onto the right track.
Yeah.
It seemed like to sort of separate Tom Holland's Peter Parker and Garfield's and why am I blanking on his name? Maguire's. Yeah. I think that was a good distinction to have, because Aunt May obviously has been a crucial character in 3 films. So it makes a lot of sense for her to be that Uncle Ben type figure. And you feel more of that emotional impact. It's like, how many times can you see Uncle Ben die? How many times could you see, Batman's parents die in an alley, right? We're in a different universe, and it's a different story. It's definitely, all these comic book characters have different iterations, and they all kind of, it's basically a sandbox, right? You can do whatever you want with them, and there's no right or wrong way, as long as you stay true to the essential qualities of the character, and hit the major beats. So I think having Aunt May be the one that tragically passes away, and to deliver that line gives it that emotional weight, and that moment's sort of earned in the film, and that causes Tom Holland's Spider-Man to act in a way throughout the rest of the film that's uncharacteristic of him, if that wouldn't have happened. So especially at the end.
I was thinking that it just makes me think too, and this could be a whole other show, so I don't want to open it too much, but just in passing, that to sing the praises of this movie in this scene and other ways as well, where I just think they really do such a masterful job of setting the stakes high. and delivering on it, and not being afraid to do that. Because as much as I love Star Wars, that's been a complaint with some of the sequel trilogy movies, where it's like, just when you thought that they might have been going somewhere with certain stakes being high, it's like, well, like, oh wow, we're gonna 3PO's gonna lose his memory for 20 minutes, and it's a gag, and then it's like, okay, like it's like you don't want, like, I didn't want to, just like I said this. I wanted to say, I think I said this on our, sorry, I think I said it on our Rise of Skywalker review, but again, I wouldn't say I want to see Lando, Chewie, and the Falcon blow up in a blaze of glory. It's not like that. I think maybe that should have happened. It's this idea, like, I feel like we tap into naturally. And I was just talking to my students today about some of this, talking about the Trinity, and this idea of there's a meta narrative, and we can't escape these echoes, I think, in our souls of like what constitutes a right story, which sometimes has tragedy in it, but that's not the end of the story. There's somehow more to it. And when you just kind of like dance around that, or have a quick gag, like Aunt May gasps and wakes up, like Tony falling down from the, in Avengers, and was like, what I miss, like that's inappropriate for her. And we don't like to see this happen. Even the way that Marissa Tomei acted this scene out, I don't know how much of it was her idea or their idea. I was like, oh, not fair. Like, because it's like they're making you think this is what's going to happen, but then she's okay, and sometimes in real tragedy and real things like that, someone thinks they're okay and then they're not, that shock and the trauma. And I was just like, oh my God. Like, so that was a pretty intense moment. And everybody in the theater, like you guys know, you can feel like the air leave the room, that is somehow part of Peter's destiny is to lose this guardian. It's like it has to happen. And the way that interaction on the rooftop, that conversation goes, where that comes through to him from these other, iterations of himself, however you want to call it, just really blew me away. It was so well done.
It's almost like this whole MCU Spider-Man trilogy has been one long origin movie for the type of Spider-Man that we know from the previous Spider-Man live action movies and from the comic books. And so I just felt that was handled so well, because I think like Andrew said, even though it's Aunt May this time and not Uncle Ben, they kept that core of the character. They kept that with great power comes great responsibility, which is the heart of Spider-Man. So I just feel like, regardless of the particulars, as long as that essence is there, it just nails it.
I think that this was a great subversion of what we were expecting. And principally because we saw Tom Holland's Peter Parker just show up, and his first movie was not an origin story. And so the MCU made the decision that we're not going to retell the origin story. And so, we all just kind of assume, well, okay, Uncle Ben was killed and he was bitten by the spider, and all that happened. Just, we haven't seen it with Tom Holland's Peter Parker, when really, yeah, we've basically had a 3-movie origin story, just minus the spider bite and whatever did happen to Uncle Ben. And this movie, or those 3 movies, are a really good origin story for what's coming next, and the whole kind of reset that happens at the end. And I mean, we already know that there is a new, I think it was a new trilogy already kind of in the works or being planned. And I think Tom Holland is still contract.
Oh, is that? Yeah.
I don't know if he's contracted fully yet, but I mean, I think it was very clear that they were moving forward. And I can't remember if it was Kevin Feige or someone said essentially they weren't going to leave fans wondering what's happening, like what happened between Far From Home and No Way Home, with the whole, Sony Disney kind of standoff. So we do know that they are moving forward with more movies, and I'm pretty sure Tom Holland is going to do, another trilogy and then probably hang up the cape. But that'll be a great way to explore where his character goes from now, because at the end of this movie, he has no connection to anybody, no connection to Tony Stark or to the Avengers or to, I mean, really anybody. and he's kind of reduced to his own wits and the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man that we've that we know.
And that's kind of what I think was missing from the other films that I know some people had issues with, is that he didn't feel like the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. It almost just felt like Spider-Man via Stark Industries, like Stark Industries Spider-Man. But like, I think it was necessary for the story that they clearly wanted to tell with these movies, and it's such great payoff now to see that, this is how he becomes the type of Spider-Man that we're more used to.
Right. I, for one, am glad he is not the new Iron Man. Like it,
oh yeah,
it kind of makes sense because, Stark was his mentor and, he had kind of the technology and stuff, but yeah, clearly that's not Peter's destiny. And so it was good to see that kind of, drop off and yeah, Peter has to kind of go his own way.
I was just laughing real quick though. Do you guys think it was I don't think it was intentional, but I had to laugh. Maybe a little bit of a funny dig at Martin Sheen's Uncle Ben, who I loved, but I was just laughing because it's like there's this kind of back and forth, especially between Toby, and Tom, in that culminating kind of like, with great power comes great responsibility, and then like Toby perks up and finishes the line. But I'm laughing because I'm looking at Andrew Garfield, and I'm like, and he's standing there thinking, well, my Uncle Ben said, Your dad lived by a principle, a philosophy that if you have the ability to help someone and the opportunity, and it's like, it was like across the multiverse, Uncle Ben, back before he passes away, like I probably could have said that in a little more like a pithy kind of. So, that was good to actually have Aunt May like deliver that. That was good.
So my headcanon on that is that, and I bet it's more than headcanon, but yeah, during that dialogue, Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker affirms that his Uncle Ben said it the day that he died. But just it wasn't on screen in The Amazing Spider-Man. Right. Because yeah, that phrase is, I mean, from what I gather, I haven't read any of the comics, but I think that is like a absolute crucial element of Spider-Man's story.
It's like a slogan kind of, right?
Right. Linked to him very clearly in any iteration of the character. So it's sort of there in Andrew Garfield's implicitly, just not explicitly. One other thing that I was going to point out about Aunt May's kind of direction and morality is I thought it was interesting on her tombstone at the end. The quote that's engraved on her tombstone is, "When you help someone, you help everyone." And I did appreciate that comment because I think that kind of that summarizes her own kind of philosophy and morality, because she was in charge of the food pantry, or they were helping those in need, but it also just reminded me too of just kind of who we are as human beings and solidarity, and the whole idea that yeah, I mean, we are all connected, and so when we help one another, we are helping, and promoting, especially within the, as the body of Christ, when we're helping one another, it's not just a frivolous act or anything. It's actually genuine and can help.
No. Yeah. It's funny, Father Andrew, that serendipitously before we recorded, I've been reading a book by Father Robert Spitzer called Finding True Happiness. And it's really an excellent book. And in one of the final chapters, he says the following: what we do to help a particular person has an effect on the body of Christ, and this in turn has an effect on the cosmic struggle between good and evil. And when I saw what you had put in our notes for this episode, yep, I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what we're going to talk about tonight. Peter's choices, have this cosmic significance, and also an intimate significance, with his family and friends and whatnot. But yeah, I totally think that's true, that when when we start to think about what, that our choices don't just affect the here and now, they send ripples throughout life that are going to affect people, not just in this life, but in the life hereafter. That's kind of mind bending to think about.
Yeah. Well, and I even point out to people too that, like, there's a and I'm going to totally not make my Catholic moral theology professor proud here, but because I'm forgetting the terminology here, but there's a transitive and a reflexive dimension of every action. I think I'm getting those right, but the idea is that the transitive effect of our actions is what affects other people or other things. So like when I choose to do good or wrong, I'm affecting other people and for good or for ill. But then there's also the reflective dimension. That means how it affects me making the decision. So if I'm deciding to choose to save the villains, to try to do good, to try to help those in need, I continually, and that affects me, and that it makes me a more generous person, a more loving person, a more caring, compassionate person, versus if I choose to ignore that, it makes me a more selfish person or prideful person if I'm choosing that, as well as affecting for good or for ill the people around me. So, the idea here is that even, when you're helping someone, you're helping everyone, but you're also helping yourself grow into a better person and the person that God wants you to be more loving, more charitable, and the like.
Well, I try to distinguish with my students a lot the difference between, like, when we talk about sin, and I like to start off by telling them that, like, no, I'll throw it in there sometimes that no sin is private. And I followed up pretty quickly because they're kind of like, well, what are you talking about? Like, they immediately start thinking of a lot of sins that are private, you know what I mean? And it's like, and I immediately followed up by saying, no, they're personal, meaning you as a person are making a decision to do a certain thing you shouldn't do. And everything we do like that somehow has this ripple effect in the whole of the human race. And we don't really think about that. We don't want that to be true, but it's true because we are fundamentally relational, beings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you just kind of ask yourself, how do I act when nobody is around? And if I choose in those moments of nobody around to act selfishly, then I become a more selfish person day by day. And then that does affect how I relate to people in the future, or vice versa. If I'm choosing to be generous, even with my time spent, in solitude or that makes me just more generous when I encounter people later on. So yeah, there is no such thing as a private sin. And
even like the analogy of like the church at the Easter Vigil, right? With all that, how you see that beautiful imagery of the candle spreading, and the light. And so everybody has their individual light, but that idea of like, if you start snuffing out one here and snuffing out one there, it's like everybody loses that light that should have been there. And we're always doing that. And confession, brings it back. And that's, our little kid described it that way. And I was like, I'm stealing that, kid. That's a good analogy.
Or if you've ever been to those Tenebrae services in Holy Week where the lights slowly dim and go out, it's very unsettling.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know what that means, it's basically it's Office of Readings and morning prayer from the Liturgy of the Hours, and they're prayed in a very powerful kind of dark with candles on Good Friday morning and Holy Saturday morning. And so there's a lot of symbolic imagery with candles and darkness and light and very beautiful if you ever get a chance to partake in a Tenebrae service.
Tenebrae is also a Sith Lord, but that's for a different show on SQPN.
Tune into our Secrets of Star Wars podcast, also on SQPN.
Nice plug.
Oh man.
But seriously,
wasn't scripted or anything.
Anyways, let's jump into the final act of this movie, because there's still quite a bit to talk about, and we've been dancing around the topics, but we need to just kind of jump in with both feet. So after Aunt May tragically is killed, we have the final kind of arc here that happens with the introduction of the Peter 1 or I guess Peter 2 and Peter 3 technically And I just absolutely loved this scene with MJ and Ned, and again, like I said, because I wasn't expecting it to be Andrew Garfield, and he has such a special place in my heart. To have him be the one to come out first, was, for me, it just like made everything right with the world. It was so good.
That needed to be the right order, and I don't really know why.
Yeah.
I think it's his humor, or I don't. Yeah, it was perfect.
Yeah. And then just the whole MJ not trusting him and forcing him to crawl around the ceiling was just appropriately awkward for Andrew's Peter, but I loved every minute of that.
And was it Ned's grandmother? Or his mom or his grandmother. Was
that
was
that was hilarious.
Like the setting, if it were anywhere else, it wouldn't have quite been as great as it was. It was so perfect.
Yeah, and I think Andrew Garfield's like physicality of the character, like when that portal opens, like he's pretty far down this alley. Yeah, but you see that tall, slender, like right away that's Garfield's Spider-Man. It was like there's no mistaking it. And it's dark.
I kept second guessing it every step that he took closer.
Yeah. And it was like he's older than me. I think he's like a year older than me, and I'm like, good.
Yeah, he's around your age. Yeah. He's around your age. Yeah,
it's like this guy. I don't run.
Yeah, it was like the portal opens and the whole theater's like first is like, oh, and then it's like, and like, oh. and then when the way he rips the mask off, like it's like everything, like I mentioned, his physical performance, I think was the perfect way, and it was a perfect balance between Tobey's more like muted performance, being the older Peter Parker now, the more weathered one, and I thought again that was a great choice in how to handle those characters, and the points of their lives that we see them in.
Yeah, so I want to talk about Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker for just a little bit, because actually I have less to say about Tobey's, but Andrew's I think is really fascinating, and of course I'm biased because I've been captivated with his version of the character, but there's so many cool things to say, and first I'll say primarily he is basically the middle child here. If you look at the three of them as brothers, and so I'm also a middle child, so and we share the same first name, so like the actor and I do anyway. So, okay. Besides all that, what I really loved about what they ended up doing here with the last kind of with Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker's arc here, it was really fascinating to kind of read some interviews and hear even Andrew Garfield talk a little bit in interviews after it was revealed that he was in the movie. Just some really cool things to point out, because after The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Gwen Stacy is killed and Peter's not able to save her. And so that really has this huge impact on Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker. And it's and at the end of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, there was no movies that came out afterwards. So we couldn't get resolution. We couldn't quite see that emotional journey that he was on. And so it felt very disjointed where it ended. And that was when Tom Holland came on as the MCU version of the character. And so this movie was really good, I think, for Andrew Garfield's character, because it allowed to bring some of that resolution for that from those movies. And in particular, some of the things that I would point out is that even Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker makes the comment, when they're on the rooftop and they're trying to console Tom Holland's Peter, and Andrew Garfield is saying that that the death of Gwen made him rageful and bitter. And so he is sharing that because he doesn't want Tom Holland's Peter to go down the same road, which is a very brotherly thing to do. And Tobey Maguire does the same thing when he talks about, the guy who he thought killed Uncle Ben, when he goes after him and wants revenge, and how that didn't actually fulfill him either. But so Andrew Garfield's Peter is, bitter and rageful. And even at one point when they're in the school laboratory working away, and Tobey's Peter and Andrew's Peter are talking, and they're talking about, you know, whether or not Andrew's Peter has a MJ essentially. And he makes the comment that he doesn't have time for Peter Parker stuff. And so it's a really interesting thing that character kind of pulled himself away from his humanity and focused on being Spider-Man only, and kind of left Peter Parker kind of outside. And I think that through this mini arc of the character in this movie, we see him recognize the need for him to not just be Spider-Man, but to be Spider-Man and Peter Parker. And so I love how that kind of all plays out. And even the healing that Andrew's Peter goes through by saving MJ as she falls off the Statue of Liberty. Again, a huge
awesome.
moment of the film. You know,
The crowd went nuts.
yeah.
There was like
gosh.
a 2-minute little interview clip I just saw where finally Andrew Garfield can open up about that, and he talked about that. And I always get this wrong. Is it Zendaya? Zendaya, right? Is that the correct pronunciation?
Zendaya. I think it's Zendaya.
Because I think I said
It might be
Zendaya.
Zendaya actually.
I think I said Zendaya, and my high school students like mocked and ridiculed me for like a week. You know,
You
like,
might be right actually.
sorry guys, I don't know. So I don't remember what it was, but he was talking about that scene, and I don't know, Father, I might find the link and share it with you because it's only like 2 minutes, but it was really insightful as far as which first of all, it's always weird to me to hear for both Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield to hear them speaking with an English accent.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Because it's like,
Because they're full British.
right? Yeah. You know, and Toby's sitting there like, well, I just actually sound like this. But no, it was a great, really neat insight. Again, very short, like 2 minutes, but how he talked about the depth of the psychology of that. And I mean, I got it. I think we all got it when you saw it. It was done so well, but the care that he really took, and how like she read off that, and there's some improving with it, and so that was a really neat clip. I might share that with you. Maybe we can include that or something.
She needed to check in on Peter to see if he was okay, and his face just said it all. I mean, there was that yeah, it was incredibly healing for him in that moment.
Yeah, I think it might have been that same interview. He said that scene specifically like sold him on the movie. Like he's like when he read that, he's like, oh yeah, this is beautiful, you know, and he was like on board right away.
By the way, Father, real quick before I forget, earlier when I just realized, in case anyone was wondering why I was chuckling when you were talking about the rooftop consolation, I made a mistake. I was thinking of when Toby and Tom were trying to like console Andrew about how he's like an awesome Spider-Man. He's a really good one. I was thinking that because that was maybe my favorite scene, like him cracking, you know, Tobey Maguire's back, and a little spoiler there, of course, about when he's like, I'm back, and falls, and he's like, my back. Yep. You know, so it was just every little detail that was so brilliant. And
I love you guys. Yeah. Thanks.
Well, and I think even that too was improvised.
That was improvised
by Andrew Garfield.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but Andrew Garfield, I believe he said in other interviews that he is a massive Spider-Man fan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's almost like that saying, I love you guys, is like him saying, I love this character. I love Spider-Man. Yeah. I get to be in a movie where not only am I Spider-Man, but there's two other Spider-Man
that I love, and I love to watch their movies. And yeah, I mean, you could just feel that, but it was somehow also like it wasn't out of place. Like it made sense as the character to do it. It was so well done.
It's so meta in that moment because, I mean, like even Andrew Garfield says, I've always wanted brothers. And so like, you know, so his Peter Parker now has the experience of having, you know, Toby's and Tom's Peters as his brothers. But also, if you look at it on the actor perspective, those three actors are the only ones to have played Peter Parker in live action. And so even they three are sharing a brotherhood that only they currently are able to share. And so it's sort of a dual sort of, you know, I love you guys, and the brotherhood that is formed there is really cool. And I mean, and I think that even shows in the characters in the movies, because you've got Toby's Peter being the eldest brother, you know, and so he's kind of the more calm and collected and wise.
Yeah, what do they call him? The hip youth pastor?
The cool youth
That was
pastor.
hilarious.
Yeah.
I lost it.
Yeah.
Because I was youth minister for many years, and I was just like, oh my gosh. It's like, so you're gonna go dress like a cool youth pastor? You know, he's like, just like pulls it back, and he's like, no, I got it. I'm like, okay, good.
Oh yeah, and those but also even just the way that they interact with each other was really fun to see play out on screen. So after they've created the cures for all of them, and they have that moment after Tom Holland's Peter has announced where they're at, the Statue of Liberty. And so then they're just waiting for the villains to show up, and so they start having that conversation about who's the craziest villains that you guys have fought, and so they start trying to one up each other with stories and aliens.
And Andrew doesn't even really try, because of course they're both, oh yeah, I fought an alien in space, and Toby's like, okay, I'm still stuck on the part about how you fought an alien in space. He's like, okay, all right,
yeah. Well, and then that's where the "you're amazing" kind of comment came into play, which I was kind of having a moment in the theater when they kept saying that over and over again, and I was like, yes, the Amazing Spider-Man, yes, he's amazing. There's another fun moment there when they're in the laboratory, and this is sort of the personification of the meme of the three Spider-Men, pointing towards one another. So when they're in the laboratory and Ned is trying to get their attention, and he says, hey, Peter. And then they all respond like, which one? And they start pointing at each other. Peter Parker. We're all Peter Parker.
Oh, it's a multiverse.
So lots of fun things like that.
And Ned asking about, do you have a best friend? and how awkward that got.
Well,
I did.
And I was just reading earlier today that actually there's a character in the comics that's Ned's character that becomes the Hobgoblin.
I do. Yeah,
I don't really know any more than that. So I don't even know really what to say.
There were theories that before the movie came out that, what if Ned becomes, because it was a very loose interpretation of a character that was kind of maybe Ned, and then it's not really that based in a real core character in Spider-Man lore. So
that was something the headline I saw said something like, come on, Marvel, you'll have some guts and make Ned the Hobgoblin. It was like this dare. I'm like, I think they're making him a sorcerer.
Well, I don't think that they're done with his character. They're setting him up for big things.
And they're obviously not done with Zendaya's character either.
No.
And
they're going to have to probably rediscover some stuff and talents, and, because forgetting Peter obviously challenges that. So,
talking about the fight scene, kind of the climax of the entire movie. I'm sure that words fail to describe how awesome this was, but what did you guys think of the epic fight that goes down at the end?
Phenomenal. I mean, just what else can you say? It's seeing them all in costumes swinging around, like the now iconic shot of when they swing and they land.
I want autographs from all three of them on that photo.
I'm sure you're going to get on that right away.
I'm watching for them to do signings. Yes.
Yeah. That was instantly iconic. And I just love how they were able to be in character while fighting. So that, a lot of the they made a lot of mistakes, because you have two Peters that are not used to being on a team. Yeah, right. The Avengers. Wow. Who are they?
Are you in a band?
Are you in a band? Yeah. I'm glad that they were able to kind of use that as okay, they're not going to perfectly just, interweave and and know what to do. And it was nice to have those like comedic moments, in between like this huge battle of like life and death, and the fabric of reality, crushing down. Is like there's still time for what is like a pivotal quality of a Spider-Man character, is to have these little moments of comedic relief. I'm glad that we were able to have those, like from the Avengers to the Peter 1, Peter 2, Peter 3 thing to You're Amazing, and so on and so forth. I thought it was a great balance of that. And again, just, since we've seen these characters like defeat these villains before, like it's not a stretch that like most of the characters were pretty easy to put down. It's like, like Electro and Lizard and Sandman, like they were pretty much a cinch. And it was cool seeing Doc Ock too come in, and you have like the power of the sun in my hand as he's holding the Stark reactor. It's like, oh no, is he? It's like, okay, we're good. Yeah, it was brilliantly played, and it left the stage, for the real final battle between Tom Holland's Spider-Man against Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin. And of course, I'm sure we're about to talk about it, but Tobey Maguire's interference there and his influence on Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and having his character come full circle. And obviously his Peter Parker wanted to save Norman, because Norman was a mentor to him and the father of his best friend. So being able to have that moment combined with everything else, and again, obviously Andrew Garfield's moment with MJ, having him evolve in that way, it was perfect. I don't know how you could have sort of done it any better. And I thought Doctor Strange came in at the right time, and again, the joke about being
hanging over the Grand Canyon for 12 hours.
Yeah. Kind of a callback to Loki. It's like, I've been falling for 30 minutes. It was great. It kind of had a taste of his own medicine. So it was, all in all, I don't have anything. There's nothing I would have changed. So the final battle was perfectly executed in my eyes.
Both of Tom Holland's one-on-ones with Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, surprised me in like how brutal they were physically. I think it's easy to forget sometimes that both Spider-Man and Green Goblin have super strength. So when they throw down, they break stuff. Like there's that earlier fight where they're fighting in the apartment building and they're slamming down through multiple floors, crashing through walls, all that stuff. And then, of course, the final confrontation, you feel those hits when they are punching each other. Like you feel it.
It was like Terminator and T-1000 kind of.
I know, yeah.
Like, yeah. I just laughed because I agree with everything you guys were saying. A little joke here, though, because I was thinking, like, speaking of the for me, like the high school throwback, I couldn't help but I knew it wouldn't happen, but there's a little part of me that was hoping for just, seeing Hugh Jackman swing around one of those spikes coming off Lady Liberty's head, just like in X-Men, or Magneto's floating around. Because but what was neat was, that setting hit me when that scene started, because I wasn't skeptical of where they'd go with it, but I was just like, it's tricky because, like, how many movie fight scenes have we seen on the Golden Gate Bridge or, the Statue of Liberty? And is this going to be like, what are they going to do with this? So I was very impressed that it was fresh. Here's this like very well known setting, iconic setting for a moment like this, but different than we've seen it before. And so I really appreciated that. And there was just the only other thing I wanted to add was, I think to have Tom as, this newest Spider-Man really squaring off in this culminating battle with the original villain. There's something poetic, I think, about that. Like, this book ended, like that if they had somehow made Doc Ock the ultimate villain, which wouldn't have worked anyway. Like, and if it was anyone else, I don't think it would have worked as well. Like, I feel like it needed to be Norman Osborn.
He is the quintessential Spider-Man villain.
He is. And we were joking because Willem Dafoe is such an interesting person. we were laughing a few times, like, where he gets really creepy, like in the apartment and stuff. I'm like joking, like, Willem didn't even know the cameras were rolling. Like, just like, what's he doing? But no, that was just perfect, I thought.
The way that he plays that as an actor is truly breathtaking. I mean, even the moment when he is hit with the cure at the end, just the way that his eyes are wide and they go back to being soft when he's back to being Norman is I mean, it's so cool to see. And he's such an incredible actor, and he's not a very young guy anymore. And he, all of them were able to really pull this off in a very compelling and just remarkable way.
And he only agreed to do the role if he could do most of his own stunts, like in the fight scenes, because he's like, I don't want to just basically be a voievoiceover,
right?
Like,
or be a cameo of sorts. Yeah.
So
he's 66.
Yeah. Physically, he's I mean, along with his such a unique face with unique features and being able to, like, you felt like we were mentioning right now, like we were able to feel like every punch from that fight. This is such a brutal Spider-Man fight, especially at the end. It was really special.
Yeah. Only a couple things that I would point out about this is that I've always joked, at least with my dad, that like it seems like in every Spider-Man film, or practically every superhero film, like the major battle has to happen like on a tower or on a bridge or on some, skyscraper. There's got to be like being able to fall stakes that happen. So, so I wasn't surprised that we were at another location that had that. I was really confused that they thought that Captain America's shield should go on the Statue of Liberty, though. But like it
seems a bit much.
I don't
think Steve would want that.
But it allowed.
So when does the government do what Steve wants?
That's a good point.
I mean,
is he from Brooklyn? I don't think Steve wants that. Come on.
The other thing that I would point out, and this is more symbolically, is that I always appreciate it when like the final kind of culmination happens at sunrise, because there's a very cool symbolicness of, and even that's Christian in nature, of like, you've passed through the dark night and you are coming to the sunrise, Easter morning, so to speak. Yep. All of that. So I liked the play that happened pretty much right at sunrise. And I think that was all.
What's interesting is that Peter, he basically loses everything. Aunt May is gone. He loses his connection to everyone, but yet he's kind of reborn. He's kind of resurrected in a way as a new person with a new lease on life, a new destiny. I thought that was very poetic.
Mm-hmm. Well, and speaking of that, I guess that's kind of the final kind of post-climax sort of part of the movie is that, in order to fix everything, everyone has to forget Peter Parker. And it took me a little bit to kind of rationally kind of realize what was going on, and that it was different than the spell that they had tried to cast earlier. So rather than Doctor Strange making people forget that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, the new spell makes everyone forget Peter Parker in general. So, and so I had to kind of like think, okay, those are two distinct kind of spells happening. And so, and they kind of, they show that in a kind of a cool way. One of the things is when he's moving into the apartment, you'll see that he has a GED study guide, because everybody at Midtown High would have forgotten who Peter Parker is. And so he would have to go get a GED, no MIT for him there. But
what about Happy though? I don't know if anyone else was going to bring that up, but I was wondering why Happy's visiting Aunt May's grave.
I think
the only reason he knows her, right? Or
he makes the comment that he knew her through Spider-Man. So So you could probably kind of wrap your mind around it in that Happy still helped Spider-Man without knowing that it was Peter.
Okay, yeah.
But now how that rewrites some of the earlier movies, I'm not sure you want to get too deep in the weeds for that.
I love Jon Favreau too much to split hairs over that. So,
because I think you could kind of go down all sorts of rabbit holes of that. But this is definitely one of those where
that was a beautiful scene, though. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Now that everyone's forgotten who Peter Parker is and that he's Spider-Man, Flash Thompson doesn't have his book deal anymore.
Right. Yes, I thought of that too. I was like, oh, Flash.
Speaking of that, I have kind of listed a number of Easter eggs. I don't know if you guys kind of notice these at all or not either, but Flash's book is called Flashpoint. And if you know comics at all, that's a nod to DC's The Flash character who went back in time to prevent his mom from being killed and created an alternate timeline called Flashpoint. So that was, in fact, there was someone on Twitter that was trying to tell Flash Thompson that he doesn't have copyright on that name and he was going to have to pay royalties for it. So, a number of other just kind of fun Easter eggs that I picked up on was at the very beginning of the movie when Spider-Man is swinging MJ. You see advertisements for Rogers the Musical as it was seen in Hawkeye. So
that was the most disappointing end credits thing I've ever seen in Marvel. We kept waiting for where's okay.
What a troll that was.
Yeah.
I have to say I really enjoyed it though.
It was funny. I mean, it reminded me, I told Christine, we were watching, my wife, and we were watching, and I was like, at the end, I was like, see, this is where you need to have Steve Rogers come out again and do the thing he did. I forget which one it was, where he's like, patience. Often doesn't seem like it. Wasn't that the end of the first Spider-Man movie? Because he kept being in all those public service announcements. Right. At the very end, you wait, and he just comes out, and he's just like, and sometimes it doesn't pay off. And, it's like...
Okay, so a few other Easter eggs. Norman Osborn, when he's in the cell in Doctor Strange's basement, and Peter is trying to get them to come with them to help save the villains. Norman makes the comment, that he can help because he says, I'm something of a scientist myself. So call back to,
I love that so much.
Call back to the first Spider-Man movie. There was also a fight on a bridge, and which of course happens in the first Spider-Man movie and in the Amazing Spider-Man. And I don't even know if this was intentional or not, but there's a moment there when the Lizard gets through the portal and is chasing MJ and Ned as they have the box with the spell through the laboratory at the lab at Midtown High. Same sort of thing happened in the Amazing Spider-Man where the Lizard is fighting Peter in Midtown High. This was a fun one for me. So when Max is cured and de-electrified and Andrew Garfield's Peter and him are talking, you have the theme from the Amazing Spider-Man playing musically in the background, which was an awesome nod musically to that movie. You also have at that point where Max makes the comment that there should be a black Spider-Man out there somewhere. And of course, we all know that there's
Jamie Foxx.
And there is Miles Morales. And then this one was kind of fun. So this was almost the equivalent of the MCU Sinister Six. So you've got the 5 villains, but then you have Venom as villain number 6, but he just was too drunk to come and play. So that was also kind of fun. And then the Star Wars Legos. I don't know if you were paying attention, but he was building the Death Star in the apartment, in Happy's apartment, as he was getting the acceptance letters from the colleges. He was building the Death Star, and then the robot knocks it over.
Yep.
And in the first MCU Spider-Man movie, it doesn't like Ned have it built, and then he sees Peter as Spider-Man, and he drops it and shatters into a million pieces.
He stands up and shatters. It was great because Peter comes in on the ceiling, and and he discreetly shuts it and jumps down, and Ned's just drops it. Brilliant.
The other kind of sentimental thing that I noticed was at the very end when he has just he's created his new Spider-Man suit. He still has the cup from the donut shop that he got from MJ. So that's sitting on his desk there. And then I guess to point out too is that new suit at the very end is more reminiscent of kind of the comic versions of the Spider-Man suit. It's also more in line with Toby and Andrew's versions of the Spider-Man suit. So this is also keeping in line with kind of Tom Holland's Peter, kind of starting fresh, starting new, and, using that to go out and be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm. I was hoping though that he would have a quick little, like, even if you just see him swinging over or something in Hawkeye when they're at Rockefeller Center, but that didn't work out with the timing. And then he would have gotten in it, but
because by the time by the end of No Way Home, the Christmas tree is not yet knocked over, so it's not yet the end of Hawkeye, but it's clearly in the same.
Yes, like what's he doing when all of that chaos is ensuing? He was on his way.
And then I guess one other question to throw at you guys is, did you expect Tom Holland's Peter to refrain from trying to convince MJ and Ned who he was?
They had me on the edge of my seat, but again, like I was saying earlier with the stakes, like you don't know what he's gonna do, and it's not a quick little honestly, and maybe she'll remember, like there's ways they could go with it. I was a little nervous because it's almost identical to the beats and this like the end of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. When do you remember that? Like if you saw that when she goes in the pastry shop and he doesn't remember her, but they're having this conversation. I was like, this seems very familiar, but it was a very different, very painful, but like honest kind of thing. I just, it really hit me. I loved it.
I'm glad that they didn't. I'm glad that they made it a true sacrifice and they didn't cheapen it by magically, having MJ just remember who he was or even, kind of, I think the sacrifice is very helpful for Peter's character, even as heartbreaking as it is. I think it was very good.
And remember, she said I think the little preview was when she was telling him, like, you come and find me and explain it, because if not, I'm just going to, figure it out anyway, like I did before. That's something there, maybe she'll figure out who Spider-Man is, but then that will somehow be like, I don't know. I don't think she's gone. I'll put it that way.
Someone pointed out that the necklace that she was wearing was one that Peter had given her in a previous movie. Now, I haven't really looked at that, or not, but
I think it broke when they were fighting Mysterio, right?
Yeah,
I think in London or something.
Sounds right. So I mean, there's potential there for sure.
Well, if Ned becomes a sorcerer, he can just reverse the spell. Yeah,
but you know what? They could actually go the route in the recent Spider-Man video game for PS4. MJ is an investigative reporter.
Oh, so that's fun.
If they take this route with her, that could be an avenue where she's investigating Spider-Man and trying to find out who he is. And that could be a way that, she could reconnect with Peter in that way.
And she's in conflict with Jameson because she's trying to do real journalism. And he's like, there's...
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
Well, she is going to MIT, so I don't know if she's going there for journalism. But
that's true.
Yeah,
that could be maybe there's something there. But...
well, gents, do you have any final thoughts that we haven't actually talked about yet? Because we could continue this conversation for hours, I'm sure. But
the only thing I'd throw in is I'm hopeful. I don't know all the inner workings. No one does. But I'm hopeful for in the sort of Sony Spider-Verse is sort of a little different. It's its own thing. They're doing a lot. But there's crossover, if I'm remembering correctly. You see, Michael Keaton's in the Morbius trailer, and so there's some sort of, I don't know how all the licensing works with it, but there's strong, desire and rumors about Andrew Garfield back in the mix for their Sinister Six, which they're working on, supposedly. So
I would be
we'll
all
see.
on board
That's
for
my
that
hope.
one.
And it doesn't contradict this. It's brilliant the way they've set this up.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like they planned this 20 years ago, but they didn't.
Clearly not. But yeah, there is no doubt in my mind that Garfield and Maguire are going to come back. I think Garfield more so. I know Toby was probably the more difficult one to get on board because he's just more selective. I mean, he's kind of semi-retired from acting. I mean, he hasn't done much in the past, 10 years. But I think this being, you mentioned it at the top, it was like this already the sixth largest, movie box office wise of all time. They're going to back up the Brinks truck for both these guys to come back. I think it wouldn't surprise me if Garfield has his own film by himself. Maybe Garfield is going to be like the Spider-Man to Tom Hardy's Venom.
I've heard rumors about that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much speculation out there. So it would have surprised me if that were to come true.
Somehow that grit works with him, even though he's kind of goofy, but his movies were, like he said too, they built up this character that he went darker, didn't pull his punches.
And remember, Venom says, maybe I should go to New York and find this Spider-Man guy. So maybe he does that in the third Venom movie. Who knows? That would be kind of awesome.
But I think like Toby, he probably won't have his own film, but he'll definitely cameo or be another featured, whether they're leading up to whatever the next big MCU event's going to be. Maybe Secret Wars is maybe what they're leading up to. With Secret Invasion coming out later this year. Who knows? If they're doing a Secret Wars, then you can have anyone and everyone from any universe come in. So I think we're definitely going to see these guys again. And that makes me really excited and happy. And I think they did it in a way to where it doesn't cheapen Tom Holland's Spider-Man. There's room for him to be successful as well.
It was a beautiful honoring of all the characters involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess we didn't mention yet, but there's also now the option of Venom in the MCU, which was part of the post-credit scene.
So well done. The mystery of it.
Yeah,
but he got sent right back.
Yeah.
I like how they've been teasing the multiverse, like in Loki.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the multiverse is open and then it got shut, and here it's like the multiverse is open and then it got shut. So it's like in Multiverse of Madness.
That looks crazy.
It's like, okay, how many times do we have to shut the multiverse? So it's kind of funny. It's that we have all these consecutive shows and films now where people are messing with the multiverse and not quite learning their lesson. But
it's like the little kid who keeps leaving the door open in winter, and dad's like, close the door. How many times?
I'm
let a raccoon in.
I'm excited to see where the MCU takes it, because I've been a fan of the DC TV universe for years, and they've played with the multiverse for probably a decade or so at this point. But for the DC TV universe, the multiverse was never quite the threat that it seems to be in the MCU. And so I'm very excited to see where the MCU takes it as kind of this, a lot more mysterious, a lot more consequential in what it might do to the entirety of the cosmos. So that's coming, because that was also I was sort of disappointed. It was just a trailer for the Multiverse of Madness. It wasn't a scene that played out, but I'm still super excited for it. So I think, unless any of you guys have anything final to add, I think that wraps up our conversation. At least for tonight, that wraps up the conversation. So before we do wrap up fully, though, we would like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the secrets of movies and TV shows, including Mike K, Hector M, Matthew R, Jesse J, and Thomas M. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the secrets of movies and TV shows and all the shows at StarQuest. If you've been thinking about becoming a StarQuest patron, now is the time. Visit sqpn.com/give today. And so that is it from us. And listeners, we, of course, would like to keep the conversation going, and we want to know what you thought of Spider-Man No Way Home. So please reach out to us and let us know. You can comment on the show at sqpn.com/secrets, or you can comment on our posts on Facebook. Just search for the StarQuest Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. And you can send us email to secrets@sqpn.com. So until next time, Andrew Hermes, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Spider-Man No Way Home.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And Mike Creevy, thanks for joining us this evening.
Always a blast.
And Thomas Salerno, thank you for joining us as well for this awesome conversation.
It's been a grand adventure, guys.
And once again, I'm Father Andrew Kinstetter. Thank you for listening to the secrets of movies and TV shows on StarQuest.